was being thought of and implemented and hopefully put into practice by the Allied forces. They had known that they had needed to make an invasion concerning the axis of evil, but specifically the German forces. But they also knew that while implementing that operation, that they were going to have to not only be careful, but they were going to have to throw them off the scent, if you will. And so what they started doing in July of 1943 was implement an operation that was codenamed Bodyguard. It was devised to be able to deceive the German forces so that the Allies would have time to be able to plan the invasion necessary that would hopefully turn the war. Now, there were three key points with Operation Bodyguard that they hoped to implement so well and to fine-tune it so well that the Germans would be able to buy into it and have no idea what was going on. Here are the three. The Allies created a ghost army, a fake army, knowing that the German forces were listening in, breaking codes through their communication. They created this illusion of a ghost army that would invade at a place called Calais. And there they would be led by a general whom everybody assumed would be someone like a General Patton. That if you know your military history or just U.S. history, that they would think this is the guy. This would be the one who would lead an invasion. They were able to do it so well for the next 11 months that the Germans had no idea that Operation Overlord was about to commence in June of 1944. Due to the success of that strategy, the Allied forces were able to land on the beaches of Normandy on a day that you know and I know as D-Day. And it was able to be an ultimate success, obviously, with everything that was implemented. I give you that as an illustration at the power of strategy. The power of strategy. We've been making our way through the book of Joshua in the Old Testament to see how God has a plan for us as a congregation to be able to unlock and possess the future that He has planned for us as a congregation for the next 25 years, 50 years, and so forth and so on. And how we need to follow His lead. We've talked about through this series how we need to be unafraid of the things that are coming down the line. There are things that are bigger than us as a group, and yet there is nothing bigger than God. Because nothing is bigger than God, His people should always be unafraid when they encounter those things. This morning, I want to talk about a strategy that will be a test of faith for us as it was as much for the people of God in the book of Joshua. So if you're taking notes, I want to go ahead and give you just the big point for this sermon, and then we'll work our way through. But to unlock the promise and to possess the promise and possess the future that God has planned for us as a congregation, we must be willing to be uncomfortable with our belief in and our practice of God's strategy. We must be willing to be uncomfortable with our belief in and our practice of God's strategy. Joshua chapter 6 opens up with the nation of Israel outside of the walls of the city of Jericho. Jericho and its inhabitants are hemmed in. There's nowhere to go. The gates have been shut, but the walls are unscalable by the Israelite army. And what's going to follow for the next several verses in Joshua chapter 6 is one of the most uncomfortable strategies that you will ever read, but especially from a military point of view. Because to a human, from a human perspective, this is beyond strange. This is beyond weird. This is uncomfortable of what God is going to ask His people to do. And I wonder, throughout the process of the next several days that is going to take place with this implementation of this strategy, how many people went home and just scratched their head and say, what in the world are we doing? And how is this going to work? I don't see any of the things that God is asking and commanding of us to do from the top with Joshua all the way down to the bottom, of the smallest and to the weakest of our families. How is any of this going to work? It's going to be a test of faith. It will be highly uncomfortable for all the people to participate in. Let's look at some of the details. In Joshua chapter 6, verses 3, 4, and 5, here are just some of the things that God, through Joshua, tells the people. Here's what I want you to do. I want you to march around the city. And I want you to march around the city 6 days. How many of you love when you go to work or something's happening at home, how many of you love just going in circles? But God wants them to go in circles. In verse 4, 7 priests with 7 trumpets. I don't know about you, but I'd like to, if I'm entering into a military conflict, and those of you that have had this background, I really doubt you want somebody like me who wears the title of a preacher to be leading the way. Where's the general? Where's the 5-star general who has been working for a year like they did from 1943 to 1944 to intricately devise this magnificent strategy that's going to be able to land all of these forces in such a coordinated... Where's that guy? And yet you want, in verse 4, you want priests to lead the way. Okay, well, all right, if you want us to go in circles and you want priests to lead the way, at least we're going to have our armor, we're going to be armed to the teeth, we're going to make sure we have everything that we need. So once they come out of the walls and they start attacking us, if nothing else, we can defend ourselves. And God says, absolutely, but I don't want you to take a sword. I want you to carry a trumpet with you. It's just absolutely silly, isn't it? I want you to go in circles, not straight lines. I want you to carry trumpets and not swords or shields. I want you to follow priests and not generals. And then when the time comes, I want you to blow into the trumpet, and then I want you to scream and yell. A 4-fold strategy to success, right? It is a test of faith. But could you imagine, just as this is coming to your ears for the very first time, as you're an Israelite and you're just, we're on the cusp and we're following God and we're unafraid and we're willing to do all of these things. And now here we are and we've met the first fortified city and we're just ready. He's going to tell us we're going to hit the weak spot here and we're going to do it this way and we're going to do it that way and it's going to be ours. And all of a sudden you hear, you're going to go in a circle and not in a line. You're going to blow into an instrument and you're not going to clang a sword. You're going to follow a religious leader. You're not going to follow a general. And by the way, when you do all of these things, you'll have success. I'm going home and I'm just, did you hear what I heard? Day 3. How was your day? Well, we went in circles again. This trumpet is getting pretty heavy. I don't know how to play it, but he tells me at some point we're going to, but I'm really not sure what to do with it, but I got to carry it. You imagine day 5, Dad, where are you going? Well, we're going out to battle. Oh, you're going to get the enemy? No, it's only day 5. Well, what are you going to do? Well, we're going to go in circles. But Dad, didn't you do that yesterday? Yeah, I did. Why are you carrying that trumpet around and you're leaving the sword back in the closet? Don't battles need weapons? Yeah, son, they do. Just how uncomfortable is that? How awkward is that? How weird is this? But this is God's strategy. This is the first military battle of the entire book, and this is the strategy. The God of heaven who put everything in perfect harmony in Genesis 1 and 2. Everything operates and works as it's supposed to. This is his strategy. He has all wisdom. He has all knowledge. He has all seeing ability of past, present, and future. And this right here, this is what you want us to do. See why it's a test of faith? See why it's a test of being uncomfortable? This is the strat. This is how we overcome. This is how we take possession. And by the way, don't forget that in this chapter, and I hope that you'll read it on your own and you'll take the time with you and your family to do so. This is the chapter that's pivotal, not just because of the strategy, but also because of the salvation of Rahab and her family. Later on in verse 22, Joshua tells the spies who went in earlier in the book, he says, I want you to go in. You go in and you find Rahab. You go into her house, you bring out from there the woman and everybody who belongs to her, as you swore. And just as a side note, when it comes to Rahab, again, God kept his word, she kept her word. Now the question is will God's people keep their word for her? But she's saved. And just something I've never thought of, just for your consideration, does God make them go in circles for 6 days so that she has a chance for her family? We know she takes advantage of it by tying the red thread from a couple of weeks ago with the sermon. Is she going around in the next 6 days that something big is about to happen? These two men have come and told us we need to be ready. Is that possible? I've never thought about it, but just for your consideration. That it may be indeed something, not necessarily for her, but for her family. God's strategy isn't to just simply utterly destroy the city of Jericho and all that it represents and all of the inhabitants. But it ultimately leads to the salvation of Rahab, doesn't it? And apparently, all who are with her. We don't know who that is. It could be mom, dad, it could be brothers, sisters, it could be children. Point is that the strategy leads to salvation for her and her family. We now need to fast forward to the New Testament because the church has a strategy as well. And can I go ahead and tell you that it is more uncomfortable than this strategy? Can I go ahead and tell us that the strategy of God for His church is more uncomfortable? Can I tell you that the strategy of God for His church as we move into the present and the future, that it's just as silly as carrying around a trumpet around a walled city? Can I tell you that the New Testament will say it's just as foolish, if not more foolish, than walking around a city in circles? And can I tell you that throughout his ministry, at least from the public side of it, that from the very beginning Jesus dropped hints and clues about this strategy. When he closes out the Sermon on the Mount, which is the greatest sermon, the greatest set of teaching ever given by anybody, he starts his concluding remarks with this as he brings that sermon to a close by saying that the gate is narrow and the way is hard that leads to life, and those who find it are few. Now, contextually, literally, from a literary point of view, this serves as a condensed summary of the entire Sermon on the Mount. Be quite honest with you, sometimes I wonder why God gave the rest of the New Testament when we could spend 100 lifetimes just simply working through the Sermon on the Mount. But he concludes it, and he tells us that the Sermon on the Mount, not just when it's believed, but when it's actually put into practice by all of us, it's hard, and it's narrow, and there are very few people, kingdom or otherwise, who would actually try to put that in to practice. It's hard to treat others the way you want to be treated, because it's easier to treat others the way that I have been treated. That's hard and that's narrow. And Jesus drops these clues and he starts hopefully planting these seeds in our heart and our mind. I'm going to a point and I'm narrowing down the teaching where something big is coming, and it's not a Jericho and it's not the walls of a Jericho that's got to come down. It's a strategy, but it isn't going to tear down the walls of a Jericho. If this strategy will be adopted, it will tear down the walls around the human heart. It will tear down the walls of sin and how it's revealed through greed and through unforgiveness and bigotry and all kinds of other things. It will tear down and break down those walls. So just as the trumpets blasted and the people walked and did all of those things and the walls just came tumbling down, if we will follow Jesus and his strategy, we will be able to have the walls of our own heart and the walls of other people's hearts broken so that salvation can take place. And throughout the 4 Gospels, Jesus just drops these little breadcrumbs till he finally reaches a point, a pivotal point in all of them, all the Gospels, where he focuses on the narrow. Just like you take your camera and you zoom in or zoom out, Jesus takes the camera of his ministry and he zooms in to what is narrow and to what is hard, and it's where we find our strategy. He'll say this: from that time, Jesus began to show his disciples that he must go to Jerusalem and suffer many things. Be killed. Be killed. And it's at that moment that one of his trusted advisors just stops him dead in his tracks. As soon as he says this is so backwards to him. This is so foolish to him. It's so weird to him. It's so foreign to him that he stops Jesus. He interrupts him and says, that's not the way it's supposed to be. Jesus just said, this is the way it's going to be. And his disciple comes in and says, no, that's not the way it's supposed to be. You realize that no one stopped Joshua when he said, I just had a conversation with the Lord and he told us to go in circles for the next 6 days. No one stopped him. No one stopped him when he said, well, what kind of armor are we going to wear? What kind of swords and knives are we going to have? What kind of size shields? And Joshua says, no, none of that. I just need you to pick up this trumpet. It'll be issued over here. Just make your way. Give your first and last name and it'll be issued to you. No one stops him. But a disciple stops Jesus when he says, I have got to go to Jerusalem. I have got to suffer. I have got to die. And I will be raised, but I have to do all of these things. He must go. A statement that I heard in a sermon a few weeks back. We cannot treat, when Jesus tells us that there is a must, we cannot treat it as a maybe. And it's stuck with me ever since I heard it. This strategy that we're about to look at, it's not a maybe. It's not a maybe for any of us within this room. We wear his name. We follow his lead. We must embrace the belief in and the practice of his strategy. We must. Not if it's convenient. Not if everything kind of lines up in my life and we're able to do it as a family. None of that at all. There are no excuses to be made. There's nothing that can be said about this strategy. Jesus' strategy for his church is a cross-shaped strategy. And it's foolish. It's weird. It's awkward. But if you know anything from history about what a cross is, how could it not be those things? But we're here today because Jesus believed in, and he practiced God's cross-shaped strategy. You are a product, and I am too, of the cross. Why would we have thought that coming out of the water that the cross would be absent after that? The cross precedes everything about my life. Why would I think that coming out of the water that it doesn't follow for the rest of my life? Jesus is so far when he goes in with Peter that he interrupts Peter. Peter interrupts him. He interrupts Peter and says, you get behind me, because that type of thinking, it's only of the devil himself. So he tells him in verse 24 of Matthew 16, that the threefold strategy to deny yourself, but that middle part, take up his cross. If anyone is going to follow me, Here it is in all of its glory, but to a certain extent in all of its foolishness. Here's the strategy. And God doesn't hide it. God puts it on the Calvary so everybody could see. And He puts Jesus right in the middle so that we would unequivocally know the cross is a part of everything that we are to be as a church. There is no church of Christ if there is no cross of Christ. It just doesn't exist. And as we move forward with our present and in our future, there are a lot of things that I know we want the community to know us as. With gracious and kindness and benevolence and so forth and so on, and all of that's great. But people need to know that we are a cross-shaped, cross-centered congregation. It has to be front and center. It must be front and center. It must be front and center in your life, and it must be front and center in my life. It's a cross-shaped strategy. Not trumpets, not going in circles, not following priests, but following Him. Following Him. And knowing that as we follow Him, it's not just going to be footprints in the sand or in the dirt, but it's just going to be this one long line of something that's just been drug. Have you ever gone into your yard after yard work and you saw where you drug something? A big tree limb fell and you just had to drag it? There's no following Jesus without realizing that He dragged the cross, and there is no such thing as a Christian who doesn't drag a cross either. It just doesn't exist. And if it's not within your life at this moment, have you been treating it as a maybe and not a must? Has it been viewed as just something that's another piece and it's just kind of on par with everything else? Every first day of the week, we are reminded front and center, not this thing right here, not even what I'm doing is front and center. What is front and center is body and blood. And you know what's associated with body and blood? The cross. That's why His strategy is a cross-shaped strategy. So a few years later, an apostle by the name of Paul will write just these words, we. He speaks of himself, his traveling companions, but hopefully it becomes something that the local church adopts, and it was what we would say. When it's all said and done, the dust is settled, and you look at the church and what she's supposed to be, we preach Christ and Him crucified. We preach Him crucified. We preach Him and His cross. But notice what is going to be the test of faith. There are some people who will embrace it, and there are some people it's just going to be a stumbling block. It's not going to be for everybody. It's for everybody, but it's not going to be for everybody because it's offensive. It's ugly. It's disturbing. But it's there. And people on the other side, it's foolish. That's not how you win culture wars. That's not how you win online arguments. That's not how you win at the dinner table. You can't do that. And Jesus says if you'll believe it and you'll practice it, you'll absolutely find the way to penetrate the heart of the person you're trying to reach. It won't be an online argument, and it won't be at a dinner table and getting into a back and forth and we'll just agree to disagree type thing. The cross is God's power to save. The cross is our message and everything associated with it. We've got to believe it and we must practice it, but church, it is going to be highly uncomfortable. Highly uncomfortable. You'll go home and I'll go home just like probably that Israelite went home, and here we are, it's a Sunday after Sunday. What'd you learn in the church? Well, I was reminded of the cross. But I really wish that somebody would help me with 5 steps to how to alleviate stress. I get it. But we need to be reminded that ultimately God's power to shape and change is a cross. And everything else will fall into place if we will just preach Christ crucified. If we'll just do that. And the reason we're willing to do that is because we believe Him. We believe, no matter how foolish it may look and sound, that when He is lifted up, He'll draw all men to Himself. So we're willing to believe, and we're willing to embrace, we're willing to practice, no matter how uncomfortable and how inconvenient and how silly and foolish and awkward it is. No matter how painful it is, and no matter all the other things that come to mind that you could attach to the cross, we as a group are willing to follow this man. We're willing to follow this Jesus with everything because He laid down His life. He didn't march in circles. He didn't blast a trumpet. He didn't follow a priest. He just did what God wanted Him to do. And it hurt. And He ultimately died. But that's okay, because we believe in a God who resurrects. So what if we die with the cross? Literally or figuratively. It's not like we don't have a God who can't resurrect us, because we do. So what does this ultimately look like then? Very quickly, 3 ways for your life personally and then for us as a congregation. One is just simply what we've been talking about all summer long so far, and what we'll continue to do in July and August with our summer series theme of First Things First. You know what Jesus says in that same Sermon on the Mount? That out of everything that is there, the one thing that is the priority is to seek God and His kingdom first. The cross, if we will daily take it and put a fresh nail into it every single day, it removes what distracts us from the cross-shaped strategy of Jesus. That may mean that I put a fresh nail in how I view my job. Oh, my job is essential, but it is not the essential. So I'll put a nail in my perspective of what my job is, because it does not give me eternal life. I'll put a fresh nail in my perspective of money. Money is essential. But I'll put a fresh nail in my perspective of money because it is not the essential. I will adopt my own cross-shaped strategy with the things that make up my life so that nothing gets in the way of God and His kingdom. So I liked, if you were here Wednesday night, I liked what our brother Nelson, who's from the Shalot Church, mentioned, that he had to go on a diet after, everybody has that heart-to-heart with the doctor, and the doctor just pulls up the little stool and just says, it's time, right? You've been hearing it, but it's now time. And he said the next step that he did was went home, took his trash can, and threw everything that got in the way of what was going to be the next healthy lifestyle. He just threw it all away. That's what the cross does in our spiritual life. The next step is to pick it up and remove everything that is getting in between me and the Lord. There is no rival, and there's nothing that should be standing between me and God. There's nothing that should be standing between my family and God, even if it's my family itself. Nothing and no one can stand. I wonder what trash cans we need in our life. I like that image that he gave Wednesday night. The other is the one another. The New Testament will emphasize over 50 times one another, one another, one another, one another. The entire nation of Israel had to march around the city. No one was exempt from this. But I'm pretty sure there were people who got tired. And I'm pretty sure there were people that got discouraged. I'm pretty sure that there were those who were just on the very edge of just wanting to quit because of how silly and foolish and frustrating this strategy was. And I'm pretty sure that that describes a lot of us walking into this building, which is why we put an emphasis on one another. I will make the time. When I'm eager to get to lunch, I will make the time. When I'm eager to stay with my own group, I am eager to do the one another. And if you've ever actually tried, it's awkward. It's not like we make it easy on each other. What I do know is that everybody here came for two things: a word from the Lord, and whether you realize it or not, a word from a fellow believer. Why can't we give both? Why can't we give both? And ultimately, it's about Rahab. Ultimately, it's about Rahab. We know we're not going to make an impression and an influence and ultimately a dent into our community with programs and all these other things. I get it. I know it, and we should be trying things. But the power of God to change a life from the inside out is a cross. And it will be people who will be like those two spies, and they will go into her house and they will get her. And she stands as a reminder that there is no sin that is too grotesque in the eyes of God that He cannot forgive. She's a prostitute. We don't know why. Text doesn't tell us. It just tells us what she's doing at the time that she's found. She's a prostitute, and she's saved. There is no person that is in your life right now who is not a Christian, whose sin is too grotesque that God can't reach them and that God can't save them. And the way that He does it is through your practice, your belief of the cross. And we should know this better than anybody else. There is no such thing as somebody's sin too grotesque, because I know how grotesque mine was. And you know what He did for me? He went in and He got me out. Why would I think that somebody's too far gone? Why would I think that somebody can't be reached? I can, if I don't have the cross-shaped strategy. So next steps. What do you believe about yourself? Perhaps you're the Rahab. Whatever your thoughts are of your own sin, and whatever your thoughts are of how ugly it is that ugly. But God's grace is that much more beautiful. And He wants you to be like Rahab and to come out. You're ready to come out. Well, Jesus just simply says, believe in Him and be baptized into Him, and you'll be out. What a beautiful, simple plan. And if you're ready, we're ready to welcome you into God's family. And if you are brother or sister, where's the cross in your life? And how can we help you practice it? Let us know as we stand and sing.